Okie dokie. Howdy, y'all. I'm George Baugh, and about 5 years ago, I wrote this little module called Playwright-Perl, and well, let's get into it. So basically, whenever you're working with web pages nowadays, everybody has a gigantic glob of JavaScript there, probably several megs, 100 megs if it's a particularly awesome website. And then you need to go ahead and scrape the data to test it or do other nefarious things with it. And you can't do that with Mechanize or anything that's more simple than that. So the way we used to do it was this technology called Selenium, which was all the different browser vendors, they would implement a little binary that gave you a canned set of commands that you could then go and touch things like buttons. You could go ahead and execute arbitrary JavaScript, all those sorts of wonderful things. And so it eventually became a W3C standard. They had, I believe, now they're up to the 4th version of it. And there was a little Java project that was an RPC server that sort of multiplexed the requests and knew how to talk to each different browser's binaries under the same API. But it turns out Selenium was less than perfect, as you might imagine. It had a sort of stagnant API. Probably the most featureful they had was the 2nd version of the API, and every version of the API since then has had a reduced feature set. So the other trouble we've had is the driver binaries themselves. Practically every release breaks one core piece of the API. And so basically that led people about in 2015 to 17 to get frustrated and just throw the whole thing in the woods and just use Chrome DevTools protocol for everything instead. And so that resulted in the Puppeteer project, which was basically making the same set of canned commands, which are very similar to the kind of concepts and mental models that you have when you're doing things in the browser as an actual person. So the reason that is because CDP is a very primitive protocol, and it's basically talking to the backend functions that actually make the DevTools window. When you ever press the button to make it pop up, you're just executing those base functions. So you can do not just JavaScript, you can also do telemetry, look at network metrics, all those sorts of things. But anyways, as I mentioned, this is not a full replacement for Selenium because Chrome DevTools protocol only works on Chrome. So each vendor had their own special little way of doing things. WebKit is slightly different from CDP. Firefox has, I believe it's called Marionette. And so somebody had to make an abstraction layer to talk to all three of these things. And so what ended up happening was this thing called Playwright was done by Microsoft. They just said, well, hey, the CDP wrapper there, it was named Puppeteer. That was a great API, so they just stole it, and they decided to do the same thing Selenium did with regard to multiplexing everything across each browser vendor under a single API. The trouble was they had to force each browser into compliance with this, and none of them all had the same feature set. So what they did was they just shipped their own copy of each browser, and they patch each one of those. So that's the kind of thing that most people consider this is the insane solution. But Microsoft has infinite money, so it's not a problem. Anyways, so any of you who have a sufficiently complicated Perl stack, you probably have some kind of web application front end that uses JavaScript, and you probably are all aware that every single JavaScript tool for doing things like minification, CSS minification, all that stuff, they're all written in Node now. And so this is very easy to pull into your front end development projects, which I assume your testers are going to be testing your front end of some kind. So it's very easy to just add this to your package.json, and then you're pretty much set. Anyways, within about a year of it being created, it had close to double the kind of functionality of Selenium. So basically everybody just has ignored Selenium ever since and moved on. So instead of just talking about the history of this stuff, let's go ahead and start talking about how we can use this. The API is very simple. I've tried to mirror what Playwright actually does on its documentation page. I'll show you that here shortly. And just it's a straight shot from their documentation to the Perl API. You just say, I've got a new handle, I launch a new browser, I go ahead and I make a new page in that particular browser, which is akin to opening a new tab. And then from there, we're going to interrogate various things about the browser, like there's a context object, which gives you all the cookies so that you can play with that. But other than that, what you really want is to go to some particular website like this one, which is particularly dear to me because it's my website. And then you can do what was always the problem with Selenium was there was only 2 wait targets. You could wait until the browser was done fetching the network data, but not done rendering the page, or you could wait until the page was done rendering. But the problem is everybody nowadays, they do a bunch of little JavaScript spawned requests after the page is done rendering. So you actually want to wait until network idle, and this makes it really easy for you to do that. And so let's go here and actually go more into depth for this. So if you actually want to understand the API more, I would recommend you look at the pod. There's a few key differences because the way you do selecting different elements is the function called $. I'm sure that probably won't go well in Perl. So we call that instead select, and $$ is to select multiple elements. That's select multi, things like that. If you actually want to look at an example of using the entire API, oh, that does not look good. Let's see if we can Control plus that. Control Shift plus. There we go. Okay. Now I think we can see. So there's an example.pl file in the base of the repository Playwright-Perl. You just look for it on GitHub. It's right there. Or you look at the GitHub link on cpan for the P Playwright module. And basically, it's got these different blocks of functionality that you can do. And it's the same kind of stuff here. You can see how you can interrogate, well, this is the PID of the browser that was opened. You can go down here to play with the cookies. If it's a frame set, you can grab the main frame easily. And then you can, as you can see here, I'm dumping some raw JavaScript into it and then evaluating it. You can also give it different on events to do things. Like, for example, if a console.log is emitted, you can then wait for the console.log to actually be done with an await like it's in JavaScript. Now, the way that I've implemented await is just simple forking. It's right here in this, not this module, but, well, I'm just deleting tabs now. Okay, how about we go back to the presentation? Anyways, so the way that I'm actually talking to Playwright, this is a node project. I had 2 choices. They've got a little RPC binary that they build, but it is totally undocumented. So I definitely don't want to be at their mercy of changing things that are totally undocumented. So I decided to build myself a little microservice. And the reason I did that was because they provide this wonderful little thing inside their repository, which generates all their documentation. It's an open API spec. Yay! I can generate the entire module based on that. So that's what I'm ending up doing. I've got a little binary in there called Playwright Server. Basically, it's just a few lines of JavaScript here. In fact, it's less than 300 lines. You can see here. But basically, all it's doing is it's loading up the API JSON, and it's just running through all the methods and providing an HTTP front end for you to actually talk to those. And other than that, having a little bit of code around launching browsers and managing PIDs and stuff like that. But of course, everybody who has worked with documentation knows some of it's lies. So there's, of course, probably the vast majority of the actual lines of code here is dealing with those special cases. In particular, keyboard and mouse inputs do not work the way that they're documented at all. So anyways, so we ship that as a binary called Playwright Server. Whenever you install it on cpan, you can run it directly. It's much like the Selenium jar. If it's in your path, you can just run it all day, do what you need to with it. On Windows, it's distributed as playwright.bat. It's not a batch file. It's a JavaScript file, but I do that so that I can find it in the path. Anyways, the playwright.pm itself is also auto-generated. So are all the classes that are based for Playwright. Everything is auto-generated about this module almost entirely, except for a little utils module that sort of glues it all together. Anyhow, it will automatically start the Playwright server process for you and manage it for you, so you don't ever have to think about it. And then you have the option of not killing it at the end of a run. If you want to just reuse the Playwright server binary, you're doing a bunch of testing, it's going to make things a little faster. And similarly, you can just say, here's a URL to a CDP server, and just use that, because that's actually how all of the people who do testing in the cloud work. They just say, here's the CDP URL, you go nuts. And yes, this does work on Windows, and the primary reason it works on Windows is because I use the trick that allows you to daemonize things, start/min. You just have a little minimized window right there in the start menu. Anyways, so whenever you're done with your runs, if it turns out you've left anything around, there's a little utility called reap playwright servers. It'll find them and kill them. And then, as I mentioned, playwright server.bat, it's just abusing the path mechanism. So that's all I got. If you want to know how to get the node environment set up, I recommend you visit this little site called nvm.sh. It will get you node installed. You just do nvm install node, nvm use node. You have a node that's working, and then you can install the Playwright dependencies with a little tool called npx, which you do npm install Playwright, npx playwright install deps, and you're pretty much set. So yeah, any questions? Yeah.
So those of us that use Selenium stuff, I feel like it should kick us off. Like, do you have any plans? I know that when people ask you to do stuff on Selenium,
Yeah, so I'm right now working on the Selenium 4 version of the module. They very radically changed a lot of the way the API worked between Selenium 3 and Selenium 4, and I haven't had time to finish that up. What I want to do long term is I want to have a shim that makes Playwright server also respond to every Selenium command. It's just going to be a bunch of polyfills so that all this legacy code you have there out there on Selenium can just use Playwright instead. Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned that you precompile the classes. Do you use autoload, or is this like static at PM install time?
Yeah, so this is all static stuff. Basically, I have a template module that is sitting inside of a data section, and I just fill it up. And then I emit it to their correct directory based on all the classes that Playwright has. Oh, no. We're not. No, there is no runtime funky stuff. That was how it was originally implemented, but that is very unreliable and has a number of drawbacks. So yeah, I do it all at build time. Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like you parse the documentation to figure out what to do.
Yep.
But you also said the documentation lies, so that means
yep.
you have to fix up some of the stuff.
Yep. So there's two classes. The keyboard and mouse class do not work at all the way they're documented, and then other than that, it's going to be some of the things. Every single return you get from Playwright is supposed to have a unique ID on it, but it turns out about 7 of them don't. And there's also some more esoteric things with regard to the way that video, you can actually capture a video of what you just did with Playwright, and it just dumps to whatever folder you want to. There's also some esoterica involved with how that is supposed to actually work. It's more than I want to get into right now, but yeah.
Thank you.
But it's a lot easier than dealing with Selenium, I'll tell you that. Okay, thank you guys.